Hey, this is the first video of a series in which we are going to discuss and understand a little bit of the story of the last 15 years of software, in my opinion, and how I perceive some of the changes that has happened. And within this session, I'm going to try to answer what is a full stack developer. I have a few friends that ask me about where they should start, if front-end and back-end, and what is a full stack developer. And I think in order to really understand what we are discussing, we need to go a little bit back in time. And I'm going to start this presentation and discuss all those. So if you bear with me, what is a full stack developer? And this is going to be a quick story about the software development from 2005 to 2020. So in the past, like 15 years ago, when I started writing code, there were only two categories: desktop applications, the ones that you run in your machine, like Winamp, ICQ, Word, Excel, iTunes, whatever you used on your desktop computer. It was one type of application that you can build. The other one was web or distributed applications, as anything that runs in Netscape, or whenever you type Google, that was an application. Yahoo, at that time you have like online banking. It was pretty simple, but you have all those. So there were no distinction between front-end and back-end development. It was all the same, but you have those main categories in which you can build applications for desktop or distributed applications. At that time, desktop programming technology / framework was Swing or SWT for Java. With Borland C++ Builder, you will be able to create desktop applications. You can also create services, but that's outside of the scope of this conversation or this talk. With C++, with .NET, you can also create window applications or desktop applications with Visual Basic, of course, and with WinForms with .NET. With .NET, at the time I started 15 years ago, it was slightly new. It has like 2 or 3 years. I may be wrong with the numbers, but not more than 3 years. I think it was from 2002. I think the first release, and WinForms was something that you could build in .NET. So all this was desktop applications. With distributed web apps and what are the programming technologies and frameworks, we have struts for Java, Java server faces for Java 2. You can write code with servlets and GSP, that is Java server pages, but everybody used to use struts and Java server faces at that time. The thing with this type of technologies is that you have the ability to write your page and also persist on the database. So the way it works is at that time, or it was at that time, that you have a framework that assists you with the HTML, CSS, and a little bit of JavaScript, depending on which framework you were working on. But most of the processing was happening in the server side. So if you create a new product, or you save a new product, or you buy a new product, what would happen is in the server side, the transaction usually was persisted in the session first, and then in the database. And it was pretty, I wouldn't say simple, but it was pretty straightforward. Then you have CGI that I didn't have the chance to work with. That is probably the most complex. That is like C trying to render a page. And then you have PHP that I didn't love it. I think it's okay. Anyway, going forward, these were the main things at the time: Java, Eclipse, SWT for desktop applications, Windows Forms with .NET at that time, and all those are desktop. And then on the bottom side of the page, you have struts for Java, Java server faces, and ASP.NET or web forms, that is for web. Within 5 years, this landscape changed a lot, and I'm not going to talk about all the different frameworks that Java built, or someone built for Java, like Tapestry or Google Web Toolkit. There were many steps in the chain, but then the landscape changed a lot when and these were the options for persistent at the time. Like you can save things on Oracle DBs or MySQL DBs or DB2 or PostgreSQL. But if we jump a little bit in the future, you have, like, in 2005, you have presented Ajax, Ajax or Ajax. It was the ability on JavaScript to perform a request. So, and this is slightly complex, so stay with me. I'm going to go on detail on other views of this, but Ajax, it was something that happened. It is something that happened in JavaScript nowadays, and is calling a server component, or is hitting a server endpoint and retrieving or sending information. Before this, what you had is a URL that you hit. Everything was processed in the server side, and the HTML and CSS was spitted back to the browser. And there wasn't like a client-side rendering or a JavaScript rendering on the browser. It was, everything was processed on the server side. So Ajax introduced this concept. In 2007, the iPhone was released, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. And on 2010, JavaScript grew in popularity among developers, and we started talking about JavaScript in a serious business. And why we didn't do it before? Because, I don't know, most of the developers, we thought about JavaScript about something that you write small snippet of code without a structure. And even when the language at that time already allowed you to do powerful things, people only write like a few functions and that's it. When on 2010 AngularJS was introduced, and along AngularJS there were a few others like Ember, Backbone, but AngularJS was the one that changed things. AngularJS is a framework for front-end development, and at that time, front-end and back-end was not a thing. It was just Fullstack, what we call now Fullstack. Everybody was playing around with the back-end and the front-end. So AngularJS was a game changer, and we started writing projects for the front end. With nowadays those are called sometimes single page applications. AngularJS had some issues with performance when you have large applications. Then React.js from Facebook was born on 2014 to answer some of those questions. And all at that time, from 2010 on, we have the division from front-end and back-end. At that time, before that, 2009, I was just a senior developer on Java, and somehow on 2010, I was a front-end architect, which was for me a little bit weird. Like, wait, I changed to be a JavaScript thing? Anyway, so that's when things start splitting, and why I'm bringing iPhone to the equation, because nowadays you have what a full stack developer is probably is a guy that can go and play around with the front end and the back end. But also there was introduced another profile that is a mobile developer, that is a guy that can write code for iPhone or iOS and Android. And it's interesting because even when for instance, on the backend side of the equation, you have Java all around with the Spring Boot and some of the starters. Um, and in Android, you have Java too. You have Kotlin now, but nevertheless, you have Java too. So it's interesting because you share the language, but the technologies and the frameworks and the way you structure code are different. So I think what happened is technology evolved to a point in which a developer needs to be specialized, and there are the position of a full stack developer is someone that can do a lot of things on the front end and back end, but it's not 100% specialized. Because actually, if you're a very decent iPhone developer with iOS and you know everything about that, you don't want to change to do something on the backend side. So the front end also evolved, and that's why you have to be specialized. And there was a need to have appealing web pages and UI work were needed. So there was also interactions and usability was introduced. So there was also an area which is called UX and visual design or designers that they brought usability changes. And what is usability changes? Like what Amazon had at the time, that it was a one-click buy, was a thing, and it make Amazon have a lot of profit on that, a lot of revenue, and it was just one idea, but a very good one that changed the usability of going to the cart and having to check out. And it's no, I just want this. So when you need UX and designers, you also need to have front-end developers, because on the past, the frameworks like Java Server Faces or even .NET Web Forms were pretty much packed with all the functionality, and they all look almost the same. Even when you can tweak a little bit of the CSS, most of those look the same. So that's where the specialization came in place, and that's why now we have front-end developers. Also, there were a few concepts that were introduced on the server side. So remember, at the time we were talking about, you have Java with Java Server Faces, or you have struts. All that was packed to a jar or a war file, and it was smoothly deployed to what it is, a servlet container or an enterprise Java Bean container. That's on the Java side, and on the .NET side, I think there's was Microsoft .NET Server or something like that. Anyway, I'm not the Microsoft guy, of course. At the time we start having complex UIs, we also changed some of the approach for persistence. For instance, we start having NoSQL DBs. I'm not going to cover this here, but NoSQL DBs are completely different from SQL DBs, and then you have this variety of options to build a backend, and within those varieties of options, you will have to have someone that is specialized and say, hey, instead of using MySQL, let's use MongoDB, or instead of using MongoDB, let's use PostgreSQL. And the reason why is there's an analysis, there's some choices that you have to do there, performance-wise, storage-wise, it's not the same to store 3,000 items that they store 2 billions. So that's why, but what now it's called backend, it got more specialized, and there was also a need both on the front end side and the back end side to have more parallel tasks to take. So now you have more front end developers and you have more back end developers. You can achieve more work in less time than if you have a few guys that do everything. So there were a few things why this world split, and now it's split in more things. There's data science, there's data manipulation, there's artificial intelligence. There's many areas, but we're talking about full stack developer. So, what is a full stack developer? A full stack developer is one that can understand this page. So what is this page? This page talk about CSS and HTML on the front end side. They're going to be able to have the right appearance aligned with what UX and the visual design said. Use frameworks such as Angular or some architects on the UI like React, because React is a library, it's not a framework, and apply some magic. So you have React, Axios, Redux, and Thanks to put it all together, or use Angular as it comes, and then implement CI/CD, use unit tests that I didn't write here, or end-to-end test, and keep the front end side. But also, a full stack developer needs to be able to go on and decide which is going to be the database that is going to be used for persist data, or at least be able to use it from what the architect decide, because maybe that's a decision on the architect side. If the project have an architect that says, okay, let's go with MySQL or Cassandra. Anyway, communicate with other systems. You probably, if it's e-commerce, you will have to use another system to process a payment, expose the contracts and operations to the front end side. So that beautiful HTML and CSS can communicate to the backend and start saving things on the database, or processing a payment, or whatever it happens on the backend. And I'm just giving a simple example. Also implement CI/CD, and one thing that we have now is that you have containers all around. Like, what is a container? Container is the ability to deploy these solutions in different systems. Is kind of, if you have what we have in Java many years ago was a var. So now it's a container that is called Docker or Kubernetes, and you can deploy those containers in different servers. So if you have a guy that can achieve all these, that's a full stack developer. Maybe have some of these and not all, and is a full stack developer also, but that guy needs to change HTML as well as change contract on an API, and probably connecting an API from Angular to whatever you have on the backend side. It could be Node.js or Java. So that's a full stack developer. I hope this make a little bit of sense. This is part A. I'm going to probably go ahead and have another video in a few days about what is frontend nowadays, and one about what is backend nowadays. So I hope you enjoy it. I hope it's not super confusing. And again, thanks for watching.